draft. Uh, Without further ado, we're going to kick it off. I'll let each of the panelists sort of introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their projects.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Claire and I'm from IoTex. I'm the ecosystem marketing lead at IoTex and happy to be here and talk with you guys. It's going to be great.
Hey everybody, my name is Brady Gentile. I'm in product marketing at Hedera. We're a layer one public distributed ledger solution, and we've got some unique governance and unique technology behind the scenes for our network. So excited to talk to you a little bit about that today, and hopefully walk away with some more new information.
All right, Brady, what you just said goes very well with my first question. You almost read it off the card. What makes each of your technologies unique in terms of being a layer one?
All right, so IoTex is a layer one network, and what makes it really unique is that it's IoT focused. So IoTex's real mission, its vision is connecting real world data and connecting real people's lives to Web3. So what's really cool about that is that it's really that full stack solution. It starts with trusted hardware devices, make sure that it's producing trusted data that then gets sent to the blockchain. And once it's on the blockchain, it's verifiable, it's in real time, and it can actually be used to interact with dApps. So that real world data can be input as dApps so that people can interact, they can do different things. But what's really cool from the developer perspective is that it still, as a layer one, provides all of those needs where it's EVM compatible, it's extremely fast, it has very low fees, it has instant block finality with 5-second time, and it also costs about a fraction of a cent per transaction. So what makes it really cool and really exciting is that it's opening this brand new design space for developers. So it's inviting developers to say, how can we bring real world, how can we bring smart devices to the blockchain, and how can we do that in an inclusive way, in a composable way, and an efficient way. So offering that layer one perspective, but also making sure that it's that full stack solution.
Awesome. So Hedera is a layer one also. I'd say there's two unique aspects of Hedera that differentiate it from other networks that are out there, and it's the governance and the technology. And from the technology side of things, at Hedera's core, its underlying consensus mechanism is called Hashgraph. And so it's not a blockchain, but it's a direct acyclic graph. And the co-founder of Hedera, co-founder and CTO, Lehman Barrett, he had been working on trying to solve the blockchain trilemma problem for a very long time. Performance and security and decentralization all in one. And so that solution that was discovered was Hashgraph. And Hedera is the only public network that utilizes Hashgraph consensus. It's incredibly fast, fair, and secure. And in terms of speeds, 10,000 transactions per second. When we say fair, we mean the idea of fair transaction ordering. So there's a timestamp that's associated with each transaction once it achieves consensus. And then secure, it's asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance, which is a certain degree of security that you can reach with public distributed ledgers, one of the highest grades of security. With that, on our network, we have Solidity-based smart contracts that use the Besu EVM, and then two native services, the token service and the consensus service. And these two services utilize Hashgraph to its fullest extent, so they can write data to the ledger incredibly quickly. So similar to like IoT-related use cases, if you're trying to stream data onto a ledger and that data needs to be publicly verifiable, you can do that using the Hedera consensus service. It can go up to 10,000 transactions per second. It costs a fraction of a cent per message that's sent. It's very quick. The token service has those same attributes, but obviously with tokens that are fungible and non-fungible. Outside of the tech, the governance is the other unique differentiator for Hedera. And the governance is a governing council of large organizations that are global. It's up to 39 members. Today we have 26. Folks like Chainlink Labs are on the governing council, Google, LG, IBM, Shinhan Bank, a large number of global organizations, and they all make decisions for the networks instead of having it be a few developers behind the scenes that are kind of trying to make decisions. It's these folks that come together as an expert council to decide the direction of the code base. There's obviously community contributions as well as part of that. And so, yeah, between those two things, I think that's the main differentiator of Hedera.
Thank you. My next question is more general, and it will kind of lead us into where we're going with this IoT-focused discussion. How, in people's ordinary lives, and I guess you could, given that Hedera focuses a lot on enterprises, from a business perspective, you could answer this question as well. How can Web3, blockchain, hash graphs sort of improve financial transactions in the day-to-day? And that's sort of a very general question, but if you could still take it.
Sure. So improving financial transactions day to day. So today when you're doing payments, you're usually going through networks like Visa. And in many cases, those transactions take a percentage along with a small nominal fee as part of it. And as mentioned before, it's a fraction of a cent to send tokens across the network from one account to another. And so payment systems that are based on blockchain and distributed ledger technology enable people to pay each other without these kinds of financial or border limits. So for example, USDC is on Hedera. And someone could create an application that's built on Hedera that allows two people to transact through a point of sale system using the Hedera network. So I think we'll start to see, we're looking at this is infrastructure. It's basically a database at the end of the day. And what's built on top of it is really gonna be what changes the world of payments. And there's a lot of time, I think, before that really starts to evolve and become mainstream. But the technology is there to be able to do these things fast and inexpensively.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point of what you said too, that the technology is there now, and we know that transactions right now can be borderless, they're way more frictionless, and it's way more available to a lot of individuals, especially those bankless, especially those international, and really those who need money fast in certain instances. So one thing that first came to mind with that question as well is that IoTex recently partnered with Unchained Fund, who is providing direct relief in Ukraine and providing humanitarian aid to civilians. And not only IoTex doing this, really cryptocurrency as a whole. I'm sure we've seen millions and millions of dollars being able to get directly in the hands of civilians where fiat and traditional currency really could not solve these issues. So I think cryptocurrency as a whole is really, really interesting use case. Providing humanitarian aid, providing borderless payments, and like you said, the technology is possible, and when it's costing a fraction of a cent to send those transactions, and it's on that individual to individual basis too. You can have an entire collective community raise these funds and help individual people when they need it most without organizations or banks taking these fees or taking extra time to send these payments forward. And with that too, it's the speed, but it's also the transparency, and it's also the security. So all of these things that blockchains in general are really trying to solve when you're considering payments and even in everyday daily lives, this is a great solution to that. It's solving that trifecta, it's solving how people can send these borderless payments. And I think we're seeing a really great use case right now when it's being used to send it to civilians when they need it the most. And so to be able to say, here's the technology, here's how it's happening now, okay, now how can we make an actual framework, and how can we make apps that do this, and how can we make it easy for more people to see this as a reality? And so IoTex is really trying to do that and actively working towards how we can do it across spaces. So not only, DeFi or GameFi and all of these actual more cryptocurrency blockchain topics, but expanding it outside of that and expanding it so that you're touching every industry and you're touching every sector, finance and beyond. So I think that's going to be very cool, and I think it's going to enhance daily lives as well. So it's providing this need, but it's also actually benefiting a lot of people's lives as well, and making things more convenient, accessible, user-friendly. I think these are all goals moving forward now that we have this here, and let's take it a step forward and let's get more people involved. Let's get innovators doing these solutions, since that framework is sort of there already.
Yeah, you briefly touched on it, Claire. I want to expand upon how your technologies can help, especially with financial transactions, to focusing on security and fraud mitigation.
Yes, so with fraud mitigation too, I think one thing that's really interesting is when you're talking about payments, proving the identity of the sender of these payments, not only with financial transactions, but beyond. IoTeX is really focused on DID and focusing on decentralized identity. And I guess that's more specific in an IoTeX lens and not necessarily in a financial transaction lens. But IoTeX is focusing on how we can give people identities on the blockchain and also give machines identities on the blockchain. So when you're talking about machines that are eventually going to be able to perform transactions and perform actions autonomously, we need to prove that these are being done verifiably, they're tamper-proof, and they're secure. So when it comes to mitigating fraud, making sure that the people sending the money have this identity, the machines have this identity, and really making sure that we have the standards for this method. So, it's not this answer only within IoTeX, but it's focusing these standards that can actually be used across industries. So we're right now leading an IEEE working group with several enterprises, including Bosch, Lockheed Erickson, a couple others, where we're really focused on saying, how can we identify standards and how can we find these issues in proving identities so that we can find the solutions in order to make this the most secure and safe platform for all users, both personal and enterprise level.
Yeah, to echo that, standards is one of the biggest things, I think, being able to have everyone recognize if there is an identity that's on the web, whether it's on Hedera or on IoTeX, recognizing that that individual is that individual and that their credentials are in a format that everyone can read is important. We may be on the same standards body with IW3, yeah. So I think, a lot of companies in both the Web3 space and then also in the Web2 space that are more familiar with identities, such as like Ping and some others, are trying to work towards finding those standards together. And again, applications built on top of the infrastructure, they're gonna facilitate that decentralized identity. But it would be cool to see, that'll be the people navigating across the web just being themselves and not having to upload an ID or upload a bank statement or a utility bill to be able to prove who they are will be really convenient in the future. And then on Hedera specifically in terms of fraud mitigation, back to KYC you were saying, one of the things that the native token service does on Hedera for accounts is around flags for those accounts for KYC, AML, and so natively if an application developer is building a financial application and they're custodying accounts that are in that application, it's like a bank or a fintech company, and the end user doesn't pass the KYC AML, they can just flag that on the account in order for them to be active within the application. In addition, the ability to do some account freezing related activities, stuff that I would say, yeah, it's not permissionless and not sort of the ethos of Web3, but it is a way to meet halfway with what is happening today and what regulation is probably going to call for in the future. And so we're sort of ready for that world as it starts to come together.
I wanted to sort of focus now, we can stay on the verification of identity more out in the world. What are some use cases you see coming about, whether that be, and not necessarily serving the web, it would be voting or driving or in your healthcare provider. What are some common use cases you could see emerging in the near future?
Yeah, so I think driving is a really awesome example and something IoTeX is specifically being involved in right now. So it's one use case that I'm very excited about. We are part of Mobi's Trusted Trip initiative. So we're doing right now a concept where having your vehicle be able to do some things autonomously, whether it's make automatic payments for services like gas or for groceries while you're traveling. And maybe taking that a step further where your car can prove that you're driving safely, and maybe you'll have an insurance company who would want to lower your costs if you're proving that you're driving safely. So a lot of these concepts that are already being talked about, and now we're actually trying to put them into practice, again with that verifiably, that proof of real world data, and IoTex makes sure that that data is happening in real time. So what makes it really cool is that it's from the hardware level to the software level, like I mentioned, and IoTex has a layer 2 real world data oracle in the middle to make sure that that data is conveyed safely and privately and accurately. So when you have these initiatives like the one that Moby's working on, it's really figuring out how these cars on the road can perform all these actions autonomously, and how they can actually enhance our lives, and how they can do it to benefit us. And I think it is very similar to instances like voting or like healthcare, where it's not necessarily creating standards in the sense that we were talking about it before, but creating these ideas where maybe if you prove that, if you have a smart lock on your home and you prove that you're locking your door every day, that could lower your home insurance costs. Or if you have solar power panels in your home, maybe if you're generating enough power to share it with a neighbor, or maybe monetize from that data, or prove that you're contributing to your community and contributing to the environment. There's so many things that you can kind of look at these devices around you and say, hey, how can this be taken? How can this be put onto Web3? And now how can we enhance someone's life? Or how can we help the environment, or help ease pressures in healthcare systems? Really kind of asking these big questions and asking how we can do that. And IoTex wants to play a role in that, in saying, we're providing that layer 1, we're providing the design space, we're inviting innovators and app creators to say, I have this great idea for locking homes or for solar panels. And now we say, okay, here's the toolkit to do so. And we can actually prove that that data is verifiable and put it on chain and help people benefit. And even just making sure that you're in control of your data and how you want to use it, and on both the personal and enterprise level. So I think driving is one use case I'm really excited for, and just the smart home in general, and thinking about how many devices we currently connect in our homes and where those can actually be optimized and kind of worked as this collective network unit, not just each working individually.
I love the IoT sensor data in the home combined with insurance use case, because I had a roommate that was an actuary for a while, and he was saying that they use data modeling for insurance, and having access to all of that data would make them a much more predictable way of doing insurance. So it's just something I thought of when you said that. Okay, so the one thing that I was thinking of, I'm like, what frustrates me the most, where having decentralized identity would help solve this. And one of the biggest things was the Equifax breach that happened. And I think the ability for you to combine decentralized identity with something like zero-knowledge proofs, where you could prove to someone without disclosing the information about yourself, or those decentralized identifiers about yourself, your credit history. You don't need an intermediary like Equifax to hold all of that personal information. They should not be around anymore after what happened, but I feel like this would be a solution to that. It would be a very big game-changing thing.
Great. I want to sort of hone in on IoT for a little bit. I guess my first question would be, right, Claire, you talked about having all your smart devices in your home interconnected. How feasible is this, right? There's already an IoT model that's not blockchain based. Is this doable? All right, for all of your devices in your home to be interconnected on chain, is there going to be gas problems with this? Will there be data breaches, security concerns? What do you think?
Right. So I think this is a great question, especially coming off of what you just said with, providing that information without needing to actually give a third party that information. And right now, the reality in IoT is that those third parties do have all of your information, and they have it in a very insecure way. So when you think of all of the devices that you have and the companies that own them, a lot of the current IoT issues lie in the fact that there are no standards for security, and so current Web2 companies are really not incentivized to provide higher security standards for individuals. The IoT industry as a whole by 2030 is expected to be worth about 12 trillion, and we're expected to be, outnumbered by machines 10 to 1. And if you think about that reality, is that more and more companies are connecting devices on web. You have your fridges now connected to the internet, your coffee makers, everything in your home before you even step foot outside is starting to connect to the internet. So the reality is there needs to be a solution, and so the question is finding a feasible one. So I think, taking all of these things into account, IoTech specifically has addressed this question of how can we make sure that this data comes on chain, but in an economically feasible way. So IoTex's gas fees, transactions cost a fraction of a cent. You can send about 5,000 transactions per second. All of these microtransactions are possible, which is really why we are so focused on IoT and making that possible. Some blockchains with really high gas fees, it would be more difficult to have IoT-related solutions because you wouldn't be able to be sending this data every 5 seconds or every 5 minutes, especially like when you're in your car proving that you're driving safely. That requires many transactions, and you can't do that with high gas fees. So when creating IoTex, that was the priority of having it be extremely low fees, extremely efficient, scalable, all of these trilemma questions that we need to answer, and making sure that that has an IoT focus. And not only that, that's all information once it's on chain, but we need to actually start at the hardware level when it's off chain. So making sure that hardware data is reliable, that it's verifiable. IoTex developed 2 blockchain-based devices, UCAM, which is a home security camera where all data is stored on the blockchain, but they actually recently launched Pebble, which is a hardware device that tracks environmental data such as location, motion, wind, air pressure, all of those factors, where the Pebble device actually, neither the user, the manufacturer, the company, no one is in charge of those private keys. It's all done at the hardware level, and that data is sent autonomously to the blockchain using that real-world oracle on the layer 2 that I previously discussed. So it's really about developing this full stack solution. It's not just about taking data from any device and putting it on the blockchain. It's taking that extra step of caution and making sure that it's done in, again, a trustworthy way and a verifiable way, so that you can ensure that the data is accurate and that it's tamper-proof, that it's actually, the data is what it says it is and the identity is who they say they are. So when it comes to creating a platform that does all of those solutions, it's starting at the hardware level and then working all the way up to the blockchain level where you make sure that it's fast, efficient, and cheap as well. So IoTex really took that full stack solution into question and made that a priority so that we can say confidently that it is a feasible solution and a reality to address those current insecure IoT issues in the Web2 world.
Awesome. So from a security perspective on the Hedera side of things, we're not, we do IoT related use cases, and people can use the consensus service to write data to our network, and it's also at a fraction of a cent. I don't think we have fully integrated the types of standards that IoTex has created for an IoT-based solution. It would be an application that would want to build on top of Hedera to come up with what that looks like. We would just be sort of the base infrastructure for it. I think the biggest thing for IoT in terms of security on the Hedera side is it's using the Hedera consensus service, which is the ability to write very fast amounts of data to the ledger. So it works in the same way as there's a streaming data service that's Web 2 that's called Kafka. And it's a topic and then messages that you can write very quickly. And so Hedera Consensus Service acts essentially like a decentralized Kafka, creates a verifiable log of transactions, very inexpensive, again, to write to. And we're finding that people are, if they don't want that data publicly displayed, they can encrypt it on the ledger, and you can verify that the transaction occurred with the consensus timestamp for a specific event. But you don't have to disclose what that specific event is. And so an IoT application could come along and use Hedera Consensus Service in that way. And then on top of that, you have what we call state proofs. And so it's the idea of ensuring the state of the ledger when some data was written to it, and it's a mathematically provable way that would be able to be used in like a court of law. Say if it was, I don't know, something happened, like a fire in a forest, and there was a sensor there that had to log when heat was exposed at a certain point in time. And it was a part of a lawsuit for like some forest fire that happened. You know, that would be like an example of something where you'd want to be able to prove with certainty that these things happened or that that specific event occurred. Yeah.
Great. Could we hone in on healthcare for a second? I think I know that both of your technologies have talked about ways to make the existing healthcare in relationship between you and your provider more efficient, whether it be adapt utilizing the consensus service, or Claire talked on their Pebble device, which I believe in your keynote for IoTeX 2 talked about being able to track your physical activity and then report that to your healthcare provider. So, what are some things that you could see happening and make you excited about improving that relationship?
Right, so yeah, our device Pebble is the hardware device that can prove things like walking or running and proving activity. So we have one app launching on IoTeX. They're actually launching their beta next week called Health Blocks, and they're a team of healthcare experts who are working on preventative healthcare. So they're working with Dutch governments and saying, how can we improve our daily actions and how can we improve our physical and mental being so that we can reduce some of the pressures on the traditional healthcare systems and provide some of that preventative care. So the way that they're doing that is by launching this app on IoTeX, where you can connect your fitness wearables, your phone, or the Pebble device, and track your everyday activities. So if you're proving that you're walking 1,000 steps a day, or you can actually fill out a couple of surveys in the app that's connected to the World Health Organization to contribute your data as research anonymously and privately. So these different aspects to be taken into account. I think preventative is really interesting and can reduce some of the pressures on the current industry. And actually rewarding people for participating in these options. So again, they're all opt-in options, and the whole point is that your data is secure and private, and it's controlled and owned by you. But if you would like to contribute it to things like doing surveys for research or for your own personal goals, if you want to walk the 1,000 steps a day or you want to run the couple miles a day, and you want to prove that you're doing these activities and actually earning rewards for doing so. So the incentivization model is really cool because with current healthcare providers trying to find these incentives where maybe if you had people doing things to lower their insurance costs, I think that could really be tied into it, where on the individual level, encouraging them to take these healthy lifestyle habits would be really beneficial to reduce things such as needing to take hospital visits, needing to have higher health insurance costs. So the preventative side, I think, is really interesting when you're proving everyday real activities.
Yeah, I think so. Preventative from an IoT perspective makes a lot of sense. I think for people that are like, it goes back to insurance also. For like health insurance, I think you'd get discounts for being able to prove that you're more active. I think on the Hedera side, there's a company called Acore, and Acore is it's essentially a developer tool middleware that exists on top of Hedera that healthcare companies can utilize, and it sort of obfuscates the complexities of blockchain, having to manage cryptocurrency, having to touch the infrastructure, bare bones. And they provide a solution with standards around using NFTs to be able to track the medical files for individuals. And so it kind of goes back to the idea of like owning your personal data, the idea of having an identity that's part of that, and being able to share that information sort of within limits. You can like revoke the person's ability to access it, or you can provide that access if you'd like them to, if it's like a doctor or a service provider. And so Acore is doing that with NFTs on Hedera, and then a number of other identity players that are coming into the space also. So I think there's a lot of room to grow, I think, from the Web3 space in healthcare, but I also know that it's a slower moving industry, and so I think it'll probably take some time before we start to see that really manifest itself as medical files on the blockchain or people truly owning that data.
Great. I have one more question for you before we pass it off to the audience for Q&A. How are IoTeX and Hedera positioning themselves to be a part of a larger cross-chain ecosystem?
Yes, I know IoTeX specifically, when we talk about the new initiative that we're launching, MachineFi, and it's connecting machines to blockchain, IoTeX is really launching this initiative to not be the sole players. It's about creating the standards, it's about creating the framework and opening this floor and opening this brand new design space as an invitation to developers and asking developers to build these solutions. You know, the answer can't be done by one team or one company alone. It really is about inviting the broader Web3 space and seeing how blockchains can interact together and how cross-chain compatibility comes into play, and making sure that all of this data can be communicated across chain and not only, you know, kept as a walled garden within one chain. So it's about opening this design space, not closing it off. So the way that IoTeX is doing that with MachineFi is really pushing forward composability. It's pushing forward these standards and saying, this is how data should be secured, this is how you can communicate data, really creating that open call and open environment to developers. I don't think it can be done on one blockchain alone, and that's where, you know, inviting all of these blockchains to sort of have this open source, all of these core values that Web3 holds really are essential in the IoT space, but also in just the broader blockchain application level as a whole. Like you said, what's really gonna come into play is that we have the technology. Now it's time to get these applications used by a wide array of users, and the way to do that is to have, you know, the most innovative minds, developers across blockchains, all coming to create these Solidity apps. And, you know, our role in that is making sure that it's easy for developers, it's simple to set up the IoTeX framework, it's feasible, it's possible, and providing that support necessary to help build those creative solutions.
Yeah, I see it on Hedera at least. It's standards, Solidity-based smart contracts, and then bridges. And so, you know, from a standards perspective, like we were talking about the idea of like identity standards, like everyone has to come together to decide on something that can interoperate. I don't think, and this is like my own personal opinion, but I don't think there's going to be one winner for infrastructure. The market's still forming today, and all of these products are so new. I anticipate seeing that market form and some of these chains start to kind of stake their claim for specific types of use cases that exist or for certain types of technologies. Standards have to come together to be able to interoperate between all of these different chains. Bridges would need to be able to exist to bring assets, for example, from one chain to the other and have everybody and all the applications across those different chains recognize that asset using that standard. On Hedera, for the Hedera token service, for example, the tokens that are fungible and non-fungible minted there are mapped to the ERC 20721 and 1155 standards. And so, you know, it seems like in the space that's really become the default is based on those Ethereum standards that had come out. And then, like you said, Solidity-based smart contracts, Solidity does seem to continue to be the most prominent smart contract language that exists. So having that transposability across these different networks using that seems like it's going to be, it'll be very useful for developers, like ease of development, but then also for that interoperability.
Thank you. At this point, I'm happy to open the floor for questioning. We have a mic in the back. If you could just raise your hand and we can ask a few questions.
Yep, I'm gonna give you a mic. 1 second. All right, there you go.
Hey, how's it going? So, IoT devices themselves can be very dependable, but there's human error. It depends how you use them, mechanical failures. So overall, there's gonna be errors on these devices. How do you guys go about that? Maybe just wrong placement of the device. You know, if it's like a colder room, hotter room, taking out the temperature. Maybe the right place, mechanical failures. How do you guys deal with that in your overall, space?
Right, so in my opinion, my take on that is it all does come back to those framework and the standards is where it can really mitigate risk and reduce the amount of errors. I do agree that things like that, especially when you're talking environmental data, there's always room for error, and it's about finding those answers to those questions. Right now, IoTex, specifically, one thing that comes to mind is we're part of a pilot program right now in the medical supply chain industry, and especially in valuable asset tracking. So it's especially answering questions like these where, you have vaccines traveling on trucks long distances. How can you ensure that temperature data is correct, and how can you ensure that the location is accurate? Devices do have inefficiencies and inaccuracies. I think the reality really lies is that in non-blockchain solutions right now, there's so many issues right now in asset tracking, for example. When you're talking about the amount of vaccines that get lost on travel, you can't track in real time those aspects. So I think right now it's the question of the pros outweighing the cons and seeing where we can actually apply these standards to say, okay, we're doing this pilot program right now and we're seeing these errors arise and we're seeing these issues happen. So how can we fix that and create a standard? So if you did have something like a data inaccuracy arise, what's the protocol on how you answer a question like that? So it really is right now with proof of concept when these questions arise and seeing these questions come up, addressing how you can minimize the most amount of errors and create the best solution. I don't think there's going to be an end-all be-all answer to it, but I think it's about optimizing the best solution possible and having the least amount of errors in the most efficient way. So it's not totally, that catch-all answer of how we can fix it, but seeing where the most questions lie and where the most inaccuracies happen so that you have a solution when that does occur.
Yeah, I'd say there's a similar use case too with Hedera from the company Everywhere in the UK that was doing cold storage tracking for vaccines. And I asked a similar question because at the end of the day, it's at what degree are you, the trust exists, but at a certain point, you're not relying on the blockchain, you're relying on something that's just totally out of your control. It's a piece of hardware. And I think it's just not the problem that this tech is gonna solve. The tech is solving the idea that, if that data is written maybe to a public place, and this is to the point that I think that you were getting to, is it's real-time written to a public ledger where maybe it's actually easier to be able to catch and remediate that situation instead of it having been written to a centralized database somewhere. And so, yeah, it can help mitigate that issue more quickly, but at the end of the day, it's hardware is going to be hardware, and I don't know if there's, this wouldn't be the tech that can help to solve it, yeah.
One more over here.
So my question is for you in the middle, Miss. I just want to keep going with what I'm doing because I live my life, but I keep going through these hallways where there's this new stuff, you know what I'm saying? So, so my question to you now, I'm fascinated by the weather thing. So if I send out something now, the email, a document or whatever, you were saying to me, I'm from Brooklyn, it's cool, Brooklyn Prospect Park is it. So I'm in Brooklyn and I'm sending this, so along with everything else they know about me, which I don't know who gets thrilled by this, you have to really talk to me to find out the truth, but anyway, along with everything that's going on, you're telling me that they're gonna tell me now that they're gonna say this email's coming from me, but it's coming from Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn it's 78 degrees and raining and all this stuff. Is this what's really going on right now?
So yes, in that specific use case, maybe we would not need all of that data, but when you're talking about, email and you're saying it's coming from you and going to someone else.
Yeah.
So we want to say if it was something, highly confidential, or if it was something of high value, if you were sending a very valuable package to someone else, how can we ensure that it actually gets there? How can we ensure that it's you sending it? Answering questions like that. And when it comes to cases of proving your environmental data, that is a factor as well, which can be applied against a bunch of use cases. It's sort of like you on the blockchain, we want to open it up where you can create your identity and your standard. Like you said, there's so many different technologies and so many things happening and different standards that you need to be a part of and different devices to hold. We want to make it so that it's all connected to you, that you are the owner of all of this data and your devices, and it's all owned by you, not, you have to send your email this way, you need to drive your car this way, have them all be separate. So what it is that making that process more simplified as well, where all of your data is owned by you in the sense that it's proved by you, your location, all of these things. But obviously that would be done in a verified, private, anonymous way, where we don't want to know, your location and your environment and all of these factors where we don't need to know them. And the point is to take away that centralized identity from it and take away that third-party company who would actually right now know that about you. You would have big tech that does actually know your location and it knows where you're sending it from and what device you're sending it from. We don't want third-party companies to know that about you. We want to say that only matters to you, that's only owned by you, and no one else should be able to see that information. And you should be able to completely choose autonomously when you want to share that information with people. And it shouldn't be kept in a private database owned by a company that's vulnerable to attacks. So it really should be, you, your devices, and your data, not owned by anyone else or intercepted.
Devices in my data. So I'm a woman from Brooklyn, but I'm in California. But my device knows I'm there, sending it from there. So it doesn't matter where I am. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, yes, if you had a device in California that you owed.
No, I own, my device is my device.
Right.
But I'm from Brooklyn, but now I'm in California. It
Yes.
just knows where my device is and where I'm sending it from.
Yes, exactly.
And what the device. Oh,
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my question, I guess what I'm thinking is when it comes to devices, specifically IoT, we think about wearables or any other device that we use. A lot of times the users buy something is because it's flashy and functional, or there's a marketing angle to it. You're wearing an Apple Watch right now because it's a beautiful product, not because it's decentralized. So for a lot of users, decentralization is not a feature. We need to come up with like the Oura Ring or like the Apple Watch or something that makes people want to spend a couple of $100s. So I guess my question is, would IoTeX or Hedera or another blockchain project be the ones making those gadgets or wearables, or would you rely on other decentralized hardware companies who would build these products which cost like millions of dollars in research, and then there's no data play there either for them because they're never going to own the data? So I guess my question is, would your focus be on making those products that will lead to adoption, or the goal is to set up the framework, the infrastructure, and then partner with a company that creates that hardware?
Sure. So what IoTeX is doing is a little bit of both, like you said, either creating our own hardware or partnering with other companies. So IoTeX created Pebble, this hardware device, really as a proof of concept device to have developers work with it, start to create applications with something that could verify data. That was really that bottom-up goal. And I think the really important part is that we as IoTeX are inviting developers to create these solutions on top of our platform. So that's really where partnering with companies come in and showing them what is possible. So turning to a company and saying, here's Pebble, here's what it does, but we can actually incorporate this with other devices. So it is definitely relying on other companies as well, because like you said, people want the cool devices, they want the flashy, but you need good applications. That's really what's going to draw people to Web3. It's not the technology alone, it's really what they can provide to ease access, like today's even theme of how can you enhance your life with Web3. The key is enhancing it and making it easier for people, not more difficult for the sake of decentralization. So that's where we want to make it as easy as possible for developers to come up with these solutions where, as I previously mentioned, Health Blocks, the app that's going to prove fitness activity on chain. Right now, with their beta that's launching next week, you'll be able to connect fitness wearables like, I don't remember the exact fitness devices that are available, but it's like the Fitbit, the rings, those kinds of devices. So it's not necessarily that IoTeX doesn't want to do the hardware, creating every solution. We're making it so that we have the framework where you can apply all of these devices and actually make them secure from their current insecurities. So right now, in addition to Pebble, IoTeX is about to launch Meta Pebble, which is, it starts as an NFT, which is your access card to download an app on your phone, which will connect you to what we call the MachineFi portal. And the MachineFi portal is where your data from your devices is sent, and you are the sole owner of your devices and data. And in the MachineFi portal is where you'll actually be able to interact with dApps. So that's where Health Blocks will be when their app launches. All of your data is kept securely there. So with that example, with Meta Pebble, which will be on your phone, it takes iPhone data and takes all of the sensors that are in that and will actually be able to bring it on chain. So it's starting with geolocation in its first phase, where you'll be able to do proof of presence and prove your location from your phone and send that to the IoTeX blockchain and other blockchains as well. And it will be sent to the MachineFi portal in a secure way. So it really is opening up this door that it's not IoTeX produced devices, it's a broad range of devices, taking it from your iPhone, taking it from your wearables, and creating those instances where it's third-party devices that are being brought on chain with IoTeX.
One more over here.
How many more people have questions, just to get a gauge the room? All right, let's do these last three and then we'll be done, okay?
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you guys think about the role DAOs are going to play in the proliferation and future of IoT?
Okay, so yes, with DAOs, we also have an interesting use case with this one. We have partnered with City DAO, which is the first physical DAO. It's in Wyoming. Wyoming is the first state to legally recognize DAOs. They have a physical plot of property there, and they are currently using 2 Pebble trackers to track environmental data on that plot of land that they own. So in my perspective and IoTex's perspective, I think DAOs are going to play a really interesting role in smart cities and smart city infrastructure, especially opening the use cases for publicly owned utility machines. And so City DAO is actually having a great example of that right now, where they are using Pebble trackers to generate this data on their plot of land, and it's completely up to the citizens of City DAO to decide how that data can be used, how that data can be shared. So right now, obviously, with the example of Pebble Tracker using environmental real-time data, but when you think about how this technology can be applied across different devices, whether it be cars, whether it be more infrastructure type machines, I do think DAOs will play an interesting role. I think DAOs are still in their very early stage, obviously, and there's a lot of community and governance decisions being made. But the framework as a whole, I think, is really, really exciting to have community-owned machines and community-owned data, and deciding what to actually do with those machines. I think it opens up a lot of interesting use cases. One other example comes to mind, one app that launched on IoTeX called SumoTeX, where they're investing in physical real estate properties and bringing fractionalized ownership of them on chain. So their ultimate goal is to be a MachineFi DAO. So they want all of their properties in the future, obviously this is their big vision goal, would be to have MachineFi connected devices on their properties. So whether it be smart locks, smart cars, all in these properties that are owned by groups of people. So I think that general concept as a whole can really be applied across different DAOs, different ideas, and fractionalized ownership and beyond. And I think that's similar to City DAO, where right now they're tracking data on land, but I think it would be really interesting if you had actual machines on land and smart devices. Again, I think it comes back to the community and governance decisions that are made in these early stages, but I do think there's definitely a role for DAOs in the IoT space specifically.
We have a few sustainability applications that are on Hedera right now for carbon credits also. And so one of the use cases that I've heard, but this has not come to fruition yet, would be a DAO where folks would be able to vote on sort of which carbon sequestration projects the DAO would want to invest in. And then DAO owners having sort of carbon credits as part of that being received for deciding on which ones they want to invest in. So from a sustainability perspective, I think there's some interesting use cases there.
I have a question. This is for IOTA, but it may be unrelated. I know that the IOTA Foundation is launching Assembly, which is like a DeFi layer. I just want to know if you could talk a little bit about that, or if you knew anything about that.
Yes, I don't know much about, IOTA, what they're launching specifically. I know that they had the IoT focus and that they're launching Assembly as well, and they're taking their own stance on how they're going to tackle IoT. And I think it's, IoTex has their way that they're tackling IoT, and IOTA has their way that they're tackling IoT, and like Hedera has theirs. And like you had mentioned before, I don't think there's one end-all be-all solution. I think we're really in the early stages of seeing what kind of solutions best fit IoT, and seeing all of these proof of concepts start and then start to develop into actual applications and start to be usable by people. So I think it will be interesting to see the launch and see when the technology across all blockchains gets to be in the hands of people and gets to be kind of used by people, and that's when we can really see how feasible it is in IoT and how these solutions would work for everyday people. So IOTA specifically, I'm not sure, but I do think that broader application of blockchains, getting the applications built on them and seeing how those can be used by people will really be key.
Okay, and the last but not least here.
Hi, first of all, thank you both. It's eye-opening hearing what you have to say about Internet of Things and your. My question is specifically the relationship and the integration with Chainlink. Both of you, IoTex and Hedera, can you talk a bit about what that's like? Are you guys both running Chainlink nodes, and how does this decentralized Oracle network play into both IoTex and Hedera?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Hedera had recently launched smart contracts in February. And so Chainlink Labs is on the Hedera Governing Council. And right now we're going through the integration process of Chainlink being on Hedera smart contracts and then offering Oracle data for any DeFi application that's built on Hedera. I don't have an estimate on the completion of that. But we are very excited that to be able to have, it'll be the first Oracle provider on Hedera, so that'll be great.
Yep, very cool. Similar, Chainlink will soon be natively integrated into the IoTex network. Don't have a deadline, but soon that it will be coming. And I think the concept as a whole of the integration between Chainlink and IoTex is really fascinating, in the sense that IoTex, like I've been saying, is that real-time data, that real-time function and activity in the real world can become combined with Chainlink's historical data. So if you had something like weather indices provided by Chainlink to then be compared with real-time weather data for IoTex. So if you were talking about farms, perhaps in agriculture, how you can compare historical weather data in that area to where it actually is right now, using a smart contract and having it be efficient and autonomous for the agriculture industry, and have it be for methods of sustainability and maybe traffic patterns and how that relates to current traffic. I think with real-time data, it doesn't have any context to it unless it does have historical data and something to back it up. And that's where Chainlink and IoTex work in a really fascinating way together to kind of provide the context for each other to open up a lot of use cases and really, with smart contracts, have that historical and that real to produce a verifiable solution. So very excited for that integration.
I appreciate the two of you taking that question for me.
How about a round of applause for our panelists? Everyone feel free to stick around. We have some more food, drinks. I believe there might be some IoTech swag out there
Yes, there
as
is.
well. As well, I just want to say, we have some more killer events coming up. Some star speakers are on the plate for April, so stay tuned. Be in our meetup group, our Telegram. If you'd like to get added to those, you can hit up me, Jordan out there, Lauren's out there. We're all wearing the chain link gear. And thanks again.